Probably Jesus was giving good advice for you during the homily. Keep awake. I start every Advent with this, so if you've been around a while, the first minute you have heard before, because we human beings, we do a lot because of what others expect of us. And there is no season where there are more expectations on us than this time of year of Advent as we prepare for Christmas. Decorating outside, inside. Christmas cards, cooking and baking, parties, gifts, wrapping, and maybe you can add to the list. Now, the whole point of this season is to open up our hearts so that God can come into our lives and through our lives more fully. So if those things help you prepare and open your hearts for this greater coming of God, great, do them. But if they do not help you prepare, open your hearts for the coming of God, stop doing them. You don't have to send Christmas cards because somebody sends you Christmas cards, and you can go on with the list. When I was a newly ordained priest, I decided to send Christmas cards. Now, I know most of you think that's back when postage was 1 cent for first class. I didn't enjoy it. I thought I should do it. I finished the 15th of January, and I never, ever sent another Christmas card because I don't enjoy that. There's, and you can add to the list for yourself. So again, whatever helps you prepare for the greater coming of love, that's Christ in your life, in our lives, do those preparations. But if it does not help you, stop doing it. You don't have to do all those things because others expect them of you, of us. So what are we preparing for? The coming of God. Now, usually the first thing people think of when you talk about the coming of God is the end of the world. And we're fascinated by that. I was reading an article this week. I'd forgotten this. A radio evangelist, his name is Harold Camping. He predicted that the world will end on May the 21st, 2011. And he had a great following. He was on over 150 radio stations. Radio evangelist. He had over 5,000 billboards. He collected over $3 million for his ministry. People gave up their jobs. They left their wives and their families, their husbands, to prepare for the end. It didn't happen. And then he said, I miscalculated. He said it's going to end in 5 more months. Well, it did not end in October either. And then he said, I really don't know when it's going to happen. That's what Jesus says. We don't know the day or hour. So because we don't know the day or the hour of the end, don't worry about it. Don't think about it. And I suspect a lot of us don't stay awake night worrying about the end of the world. But what we might be worrying about is our own personal death, because that's the second thing that people talk about when we talk about the coming of the Lord, when we die. And again, we don't know that. But according to statistics, most of us fear that moment, or maybe not that moment, but how we're going to die. USA Network did a survey several years ago that 54% of Americans worry about dying in a car crash. 53% worry of dying of cancer. 50% worried about not enough Social Security. 49% worried about not enough money to live in retirement. 35% worried about Alzheimer's. So if that's something that you might be concerned about, again, according to the words of Jesus, don't worry about that. Easier said than done, because we don't know. So if you can eliminate those things that we're not supposed to worry about, what are we supposed to worry about? And I'd like here to change the word. Not that we worry about it, but what are we supposed to prepare for during this season of Advent? If it's not the end of the world, if it's not our personal death. Here's where it gets difficult, and I might lose some of you during this point because I don't know how really to explain it adequately. What we're preparing for is the coming of God into our lives right during this season. I'm going to repeat that. We're preparing for the greater coming of God into our lives through this season. What does that mean? That means that we try to live more of a spiritual experience than a human experience. More of a spiritual experience rather than just a human experience. Teilhard de Chardin, a great last century Jesuit mystic, says that we are not human beings seeking a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings seeking a human experience. I'm going to say that again. We're not human beings seeking a spiritual experience. We're really spiritual beings seeking a human experience. Now, how does that happen? I'm convinced that God comes to us often, maybe not every day, but often, and we miss it because we're so busy. So what's that like? Have you ever decided to go somewhere, but you didn't, and in place of that, for some reason, you went someplace else, and it turned out better? I had a person talk to me recently talking about that. They were going to go to this one particular place, and for some reason, something inside of them said, don't go there, go here. And it was the best thing they ever did. That's how God comes to us. I hope that we've all had those experiences. A couple months ago, I was trying to figure out a problem, and I could not figure it out. And all of a sudden, I hate to even talk about this, but a voice came in my mind. It wasn't a voice like I'm giving you now. I don't think I was hearing things, but a voice came to my mind and said, you dummy, do it this way. And honest to goodness, that voice was as loud as my voice to you right now. And I did it, and it was the answer. That's how I think God communicates with us. Have you ever had some of those experiences? I hope so. If you haven't, then maybe we're going too fast and we're too busy to hear that voice of God. So this season now is an opportunity for us to search out what we really and truly need from God. Not what we want, but what we truly need. And maybe it's something so simple as just to slow down. Spend a little time in prayer, silence, with the Bible. Just a little. But a time when we focus on what we really need. And then to realize that we cannot achieve any of this by our own individual efforts. That's where we get so mixed up, because we're so focused on our individual accomplishments that we think we can do it ourselves. We can't. To focus on what we really need and to realize we can't do it ourselves. And then the conviction that God will provide. But always remember, it's going to be in God's ways and in God's time. It's not always going to be what we want and when we want it. So if this time of Advent can be a time when we just step back and allow that God to work in our lives in God's time and in God's ways to give us what we really need, then the transformation begins to take place. Because we all want God to come into our world. We all want Christ to be present. But the only way that Christ can be present is through us. So whatever you want during this season, if you want peace, be a person of peace. If you want help for others, help others. If you want this to be a better world, make it a better world. And then Christ will come through us.